Well, hello everybody. Welcome back to Literature in Robes with your host Jared. God damn, we got ourselves a new favorite author, I think, and
Don't you have any respect for yourself?
No.
That's me being excited because Richard Swan has a trilogy that's been out for a little bit, The Empire of the Wolf. After reading these books, I am a new fan. He's up there with some of my favorite authors: Rob J. Hayes, Christopher Ruocchio, Fonda Lee, R.F. Kuang, Joe Abercrombie. Everything that he's going to put out, I'm going to sink my teeth into.
That's good.
I say that because I've had a hard time reading through books from start to finish, trilogies, 6-book series, 4-book series, what have you. And I blew through all 3 of these books, plus the short story, The Scour. The Empire of the Wolf is The Justice of Kings, The Tyranny of Faith, The Trials of Empire. Yes, and what are these books about? Okay, so the main character is Von Volt. He is a justice for the king. They are the ones who make sure that the folks in the land are following the law. They are judge, jury, and executioner. They basically uphold the king's justice. And so we are brought into this world and we are introduced to Von Volt through the eyes of a secondary character, which I think is what blows my mind the most, is that this story is told through a first-person narrative, but it is through a secondary character. Typically, it is the protagonist, the main protagonist, telling their own story, or at least the central character in the story that has the mic throughout the whole book. In this story, we're introduced to Helena, but you don't quite pick that up until a few chapters in. This person is a clerk for this main character, Von Volt. It's really neat to discover a main character through someone else's description of that person that also involves their thoughts and feelings about the person they are describing in the narrative. It is so cleverly done that I really, really enjoyed how that was the narrative device in the story. The world in its own right is just so mysterious and grimy, and it feels like the empire is crumbling, which it is. The story, it's presented like a mystery, almost like a Sherlock Holmesian story. There's a mystery and it is a complex weave, but it's also very straightforward. The Justice of Kings, some people might think it's got kind of a slow burn, but it's never not interesting. But you're steeped in the law of the land, and he's describing a democracy, basically, a liberal democracy with a central king or an emperor, but it's very relevant to current events. I'll just say that. I gave The Justice of Kings a 4.9 robes out of 5. I just got so surprised by this. It slapped me right in the face. The cover art is by Martina Fakova. Pretty cool. That, I would imagine, is the character Von Volt, the Justice. On to the next one. The Tyranny of Faith, again by the same artist, Martina Fakova. And this, I believe, is our narrator, Helena. Helena takes up the reign of telling the story again, and these books are just quality reads. The character writing, maintaining the story without spending a whole lot of time building out exposition. I could tell the exposition was happening, but it was happening so natural. And he also starts with a mystery in the second book and expands the world. We learn more about gods. We learn about some of these powers that these justices have. The magic system, I don't want to talk too much about because that's part of what's really cool about this world. But we definitely learn that there are gods involved with this. There's a sort of a bargain. We just discover that the rabbit hole goes deeper and deeper. I know that some people have commented on these books that they're like fantasy horrors or fantasy like zombie books or whatever. There are elements of that in these, but I almost feel like those are still the wrong words used to describe it. The overall presentation of this world, I think, is grimdark, and it's I don't know what the word is, maybe hellistic, maybe Dantean, or something just tragic about what's happening. And the narrator, Helena, is constantly dropping like these hints that
If I had known what was going to happen in the future, I never would have tried that, or I never would have said that, or I never would have thought that.
it just keeps you reading like, oh my gosh, what is going to happen? In The Tyranny of Faith, Von Vault, something happens in the end of the first one that seriously afflicts him with something bad. And so his retainer and Helena become a little more involved in the story. They become a little more of a central character, despite what the main character Von Vault is going through. He's always finds himself at the center of these stories, despite them being told from another character's point of view. So we're introduced more to the world. We expand further south. There's different cultures. Shouldn't be a spoiler when I say it's called the Empire of the Wolf for a reason. It seems to go darker still. The implications of some of the things that Von Vault is going through definitely bring a darker tone to this book. It seemed a little bit slower, but when I say that, I just mean that it took its time again to develop the character arcs that are going on. This book was excellent once again because part of it's just Richard Swan's writing style. The way he uses that secondary protagonist to talk about the main protagonist, and even the titular characters are well fleshed out, similar past experiences as their employer Von Vault. Oh man, it was just so good. Tyranny of Faith, I gave this one a 4.7 out of 5. And it may not be fair, but at the same time, when I came away from it, that's just how I felt. The main character, Helena, her character arc seemed to just take a little too much time for my liking. There are certain aspects to reading her that were frustrating, I guess, just not seeing her realize her full potential yet. But I still really enjoyed that conflict that was going on within her and how she was trying to help others to overcome their conflict. Again, delving into something a little different than the first one. And then in the third one, The Trials of Empire, is a really nice wrap up. Everything came back full circle in a lot of ways, because in the first book it mentions Helena wishes that they'd never gone into the first town that they went into in the first book, in the first chapter. So not a surprise. But in this one you discover, I think this is one of the gods. I could be mistaken. Sometimes when you look at these covers, you are thinking, well, who the heck is that? So once again, Martina Frankova did this cover. The story wrapped up everything masterfully. Somehow the chaos that everything is driving towards is shored up in the end quite nicely. And again, it was really hard to not draw parallels between today's sort of climate with the climate of the book. I mean, the book was definitely much more dramatic, much more dire, much more holy shit. The outcomes were a lot more cataclysmic, I would say. But the way that the book wrapped everything up was great. This was kind of a legal detective fantasy that has very dark things in it, very dark topics, very dark descriptions of pretty bad things happening, but nothing that was ever over the top, nothing that seemed hyperbolic. It seemed appropriate. A lot of characters in these books were not safe. I think Richard Swan was very judicious about doling out to the characters where they could and couldn't get it, not giving you too much of a sense of safety while you were reading these books. But it was a highly satisfying end. I really couldn't find anything about this last book that did not satisfy me in some way. There were no loose ends whatsoever, outside of the ones that, you know, we're probably going to be talking about in the next trilogy, The Grave Empire, the Empire, Graves Empire. And The Great Silence, that's what it was. I gave this book a whopping 5 out of 5 robes. I love this. It gave me everything that I wanted out of the first 2 books to come out in the end. I really enjoyed this trilogy so much. I bought the Scour thinking that, you know, hey, if I'm going to enjoy this as much as I did, I'm going to want every little thing about the world and the Empire of the Wolf in my collection. And the Scour is a little short story. It is a prequel to these 3 beautiful novels here. The Scour is told in a third-person perspective, mostly from Von Vault's point of view, showing another town that Von Vault, as the Justice, comes into and has to try and solve the town's problems. It's only about 100 pages long. I believe the Broken Binding has a volume of it with perhaps sprayed edges. I think it's an autograph copy. But the Scour introduces you to some of the characters in the first couple books that were really great characters, and it tells a little bit of the backstory about how they came to be familiar. Again, we didn't really have an idea of what those characters meant to Von Volt, and we get to discover a little bit how he feels about what it's like to work with them and what their particular set of skills look like in action. It was a ripper. I just read it in like a little over a day, and I enjoyed this one so much that I gave this one a 5 out of 5 robes as well. I haven't had a novella this year that's a 5 out of 5, so this is it. Richard Swan, you're smashing it, brother. So The Scour was a great book. And yeah, I did have this other one here, The Grave Empire. This is a broken binding special edition that was published through Orbit. But the broken binding has this. Oh, I love this cool like ship. This book does have some unique interior art as well as exterior art. So I can't wait to get into this one. His second one is coming out, I think, in March of 2026, the end of March. And this looks like it's more of an undersea thing. And I mentioned in the second book and the third book too, those humanoid type creatures. It looks like there's some creatures in this one that could be, there's the end page on one side and the back end page. There's no art in here necessarily, but signed by Richard Swan. Cute little. Which one? Which one? Which one? There's Richard right there. He looks like a nice young man. Huh. I think on the whole, boy, that series was like a 4.8, 4.9 out of 5. I loved it. Everything that was in there was purposeful. Any kind of like slowness was because I'm not used to reading detective stories, mysteries, murder mysteries, or anything like that. I mean, he never really dwells in one thing for long. He keeps the plot moving, keeps the story going. It's fast paced. If he does have lulls, then he's doing it for a good reason, so that later on in the story that can play a part in a moment that is a little more intense. I'm curious to see if you guys have read anything by Richard Swan. If you haven't, I think The Empire of the Wolf is a great place to start. But if you guys have any thoughts, comments about it, leave it in the comment section below. Like, subscribe, do the bell thing, whatever. And remember, keep reading. Where do you think to start? I think the Grave Event, oh man. Oh man, I got. Ah! Get rid of the fly! Landed on my face. The thing that blows my way the most. All right. It is called The Empire. Some of my favorite author, Fakova. And then, but second of my gig draw. Comedy. I don't even know where I left off. Okay. All right. Yeah. So that uphold. I was so close. They basically uphold the king's justice.